You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
You know, I wish we could find some way to hold people accountable. Free speech is a great idea, but we're in a war.
To make sure the economy doesn't collapse, I've abandoned free market principles to save the free market system.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
You're listening to Common Sense Radio with A.J. Davis on the Lanterns Radio Network. Welcome to the program, folks. You're listening to Common Sense Radio on the Lanterns Radio Network, and I have the honor to have Riaz Patel on the program today. How are you, Riaz?
I'm good.
I'm sorry you broke up right there. What was that?
I said I'm good. I'm very glad to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. And we talked earlier last week, and we decided we will not have any prep. We will have not any preconceived notions coming into this.
At all.
And it was very hard for myself, like we were just talking off air. It was very difficult because I'm the type of person that likes to be prepared and have things lined up. But like we discussed, is the divide that's going on in America is really troubling, and we should just have an open dialogue to see where both of us can help bring people from all over the world, if not just the United States, to come together more. That's how I'm feeling, because in the book, and as you know, I'm a Christian, and the thing that really sets me in the Bible is Mark 12:31. It's love your neighbor as yourself, and that really,
yeah.
And I grew up in Virginia, diverse background. Now I live in the Pacific Northwest, another diverse background where I'm living, and that to me is just the center of what everybody should be. Love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think so many times because we're so connected, and I use quotations to say that, we are more involved with someone who lives thousands of miles away from us than we are with the cries and pleas of a neighbor who's 3 blocks away. And I think that makes us all feel a little impersonalized, that everyone in this huge spectrum of humanity gets several labels attached to them, and that's who you are moving forward. Whereas, if you actually take the time like this to sit, chat, find the gray in the conversations that are really not black and white, then I think, we have something here.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the labels. Labels are almost like going to be the death of me. That's why I'm balding, because everyone has to label something. You're a right-wing nut. You're a left-wing nut. You're this. You're that. And I am so sick of labels. So sick of labels. How do you feel? Because you lived how long did you live in L.A. for?
I was in L.A. for a decade. So a decade in L.A., a decade in New York.
Oh, wow. So you saw the labels
a little bit
firsthand.
of each. Absolutely. And I think, we're all navigating this space where everyone is included. You're talking about hundreds and thousands of people engaging, tweeting, conversing. And so it's become this shorthand of saying, here's who I am. As a result, advertisers, campaigners are trying to get to you. So they use the same matrix, shorthand, label, 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 to try and target you. The problem is when we drill down so much into the labels, that's where the echo chambers start, is if I'm talking within my label, with people who are my label, who understand my label, no one's learning anything. No one's learning anything. And so I think having these conversations that we say, okay, you and I we think on opposite sides of the political spectrum. Let's actually talk before we assume or judge anything and see where we really are.
Absolutely. And before I even hit record, I was looking at your Twitter feed, and it's one thing that I saw that you tweeted out October 25th that gave me the utmost respect to you. As a liberal, I often disagree with at PragerU. As an American, I do not want them silenced.
Yeah.
That's where people on different sides, they just want to silence each other. Where to me, I've never in my life I want you silenced because you believe in, for instance, climate change. Okay, let's have a civil discussion and say, here's my perspective, here's yours. Let's move forward. That shouldn't divide people.
My thought is, if you hold these opinions that you believe are correct, and you're so certain of them, don't you have a bit of an obligation then to try and persuade others? Don't you have an obligation to say, here's what I think. If I believe I'm right, allow me to try and convince you. Not force you, but convince you. And I think we've gotten to this thing where I know I'm right, but I don't need to talk to anyone else who's wrong, which doesn't move the agenda forward at all. For example, I was talking to someone about racism. Pointing out that someone is racist, which gets used a lot now, is like saying to someone, okay, you have a cancer. Now what? What's the next part? How do we treat it? How do we adjust it? If I turn to someone and say, what you just said is racist, but I won't engage you human to explain why, to talk about it, to have you understand my point of view, then nothing good has been created. Nothing has moved forward. We're just diagnosing people left and right with what their flaws are, but we're not actually engaging in a way to help them. Now, that's if you think you're right. In many situations where I thought I was right. But I walked in and like, you know what? There's some pretty compelling thing. No. And so to me, you really have to go in without the objective of wanting to be right. But to me, I go in, what is it I don't know? Because I have the best judgment based on what I know. But I guarantee you there are things about your life that I do not know. And I need to know them to know if my opinion is still correct.
Absolutely. And one of the things that people are when you brought up racism is people are trying to solve racism with more racism. And that to me is fundamentally wrong. And that's like what I said in the Bible. Love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, well, white privilege, that's the term right now that is getting floated all over social media and all these clickbait emails that you get from different sides that are it's absolutely, to me, is disgusting.
Yeah.
And what are you seeing from the other side of? Do you believe in that white privilege nonsense?
I will say, as you have to remember, I'm a minority. I'm a minority. That I'm a gay Muslim immigrant. So I would say most of my life has been on the receiving end of what I'll call majority think. I don't really think the expression white privilege is helping anything. I will say there's something called majority think, which is when I walk into a mosque, for example, I know everyone's talking and having conversations, assuming everyone's hetero. I am not. So I know what it's like to be in that world where everyone makes assumptions. And that happens to me in a variety of ways. That happens to me in Hollywood. That happens to me, wherever I am. What I would say about race, and it is a very hard thing to understand. It's like I was telling Glenn Beck when we chatted that if I were to line up 5 black people and have him distinguish them, he would have a harder time. Or let's say 5 brown people. He would have a harder time than I would because my eyes are much more trained to see the subtlety. If you can't see the subtlety of 5 South Asians that look similar, that's not racist. To me, that's not a racist thing. And I feel like people jump in where racist can be ignorance, it can be lack of awareness, it can be just not knowing. I didn't know I was supposed to call that. I have no problem with that. What I try to explain to people, mostly who are white in this country, because when I have this conversation in Saudi Arabia, it's a very different conversation because that is a place where it's not about white. It's talking about brown majority, Islamic majority. How do we engage with this Western world? So only when it comes to white privilege, I do think that there is a series of really hardships that have happened governmentally. And I would say to anyone who actually wants to learn, and I had to learn, I watched a documentary called The 13th. It's about basically the 13th Amendment that gave the slaves their freedom, but said they would be given the rights unless they were prisoners of the state. Watch the documentary. It's like 100 minutes. It blew my mind to say, wait a minute, we're not talking about something that happened 100 years ago, 20 years ago. I see how it connects to now. So to me, there is something that is majority people, and in this country that would be whites, have a harder time understanding. I don't get angry at them because they don't. I think my job is to say, hey, as a minority, this is what it's like. For example, I could show you a photo of 10 people sitting around a conference table, and I could ask you how many of them are libertarian. You wouldn't know. How many of them are Christian? You wouldn't know. How many of them are black? You would know, because race precedes us. And so even though we don't want to go around the world saying, hey, we're labeled, that is our experience. Everyone's experience is a day, 365 days a year, times how many years I've been alive. My race gets brought up in my face a lot more than I want to, and to be honest, it's not the way I really wanted to see myself. But in this country, growing up in the late 70s, that's what it was. So white privilege stands for something, but to me, I don't even like the term of it, because I think it invalidates people. People's lives can be very hard, very difficult, very challenging, regardless of skin. What I'm saying when I look at something like Black Lives Matter and the Take a Knee, which we can talk about, is I'm like, wait a minute, this stuff is pretty intense. What do I not know? This documentary changed a lot of my thinking. You may not love all of it, but I think it's important for people to see. Because rather than spending an hour online putting out vicious, angry stuff, spend an hour actually, what do you not know? I didn't know any of this. I've got tons of Black friends. I didn't know this. Watch it. It's very interesting. So white privilege, I think, has become a term just to invalidate someone now. I don't think there's anything productive in it, so I tend not to use it.
Yeah, I don't use it as well. I actually encountered racism, I think, for the first time in my entire life. Actually, recently, at least I perceived it as to be. I work in a public school, and I won't say which one to keep. You know how people, anyways, and a highly Hispanic area. And I was talking with a couple of the secretaries who are of Hispanic background, and a mom had came in that she was a Hispanic mom, the nicest lady in the world. I'd do anything for her because she used to bring us food all the time, and I'm just the janitor. And she was just the sweetest lady. She moved and said, "Oh, how's the school going?" She looks over at the secretaries and goes, "There's too many white people there." And I go, I've never in my entire life experienced that. I don't know what you would call. I was shocked. My
Hurt.
stomach. Yeah, I was, because
Yeah.
I smiled at, I communicated with, I was speechless. As you can tell right now, I was speechless about it.
Yeah.
And it actually really hurt me, because if it was reversed, if I said, okay, well, there was too many of Hispanics, I would be hemmed up. I'd be the worst person in the world. But I grew up in Virginia. My parents were rough and tough, and I have a skin of armor. I like to say, I don't let things try and offend me, but that really dug deep into the heart there.
Why do you think it did?
Because I've never, I never thought about that. That's an excellent question.
I would say, if I'm reading what you're saying, it's because you've never been so quickly dismissed and judged with something that had nothing to do with your character. And I think that what you experience is, to me, what it feels to be on the receiving end of racism. Now, I'd say that probably started with me when I was 3, 4. Certain parents would say, don't play with that kid. I went to a Catholic school, and the head priest brought me into his office and said, I need to explain to you when I was 4 why my family would burn in hell. Certain people, when I went to school, didn't want their kids playing with me. There's so many. After 9/11, I lived in Manhattan. I lost a friend in the towers. And certain bars that I would go to for years asked me, can you please leave? People are getting uncomfortable. The rage you felt, if you felt that day in, day out, it would change you. It would have an effect where you're like, I want people to understand what this feels like. That, to me, is the better conversation about white privilege, is to me to say, you, because we live in America, which happens to be majority white, have experienced that less. It sucks, it hurts, it's painful to the core, but you've experienced it less. We've experienced it so much more day in, day out, jobs, social. People would say, I don't want to date someone ethnic. People would say, when I was, dating when I was in the 90s, beginning of online dating, people would say, white, we're looking to date white. That's a preference. It's fine. But most of my life, it was white wanting to date white. And I always used to look in the mirror and wish that my skin were white. I still, until recently, used to turn and be like, disappointed. Because it's just the way we grow up thinking that's better, this is worse. That is, to me, the most productive way I can try and explain the thinking of white privilege. I don't believe the term is helpful, and I don't believe what people assume your life hardship is or isn't goes hand in hand with white privilege. But I think there's a majority think for having just luckily been in the majority. Again, if you were to be transferred and be in Istanbul right now, we'd be having a very different conversation in a year. Because you're like, that sucks every day. And that's what we mean, is that to me, I do not believe you or people are inherently flawed. I think they just don't see how much it is. And I think our side could be better about explaining it in a way that doesn't make people defensive and feel attacked.
I would love. That's why I wanted to connect with you, and that's the whole reason. What can we all do to really bring the walls down? Because right now the walls are as high up for white people, Trump supporters, Bernie Sanders. You get where I'm going with this?
Yeah. We see what is on our mind the most. I used to do a lot of makeover shows where we worked with women and their self-esteem issues, like really got in deep. And I would say to these women, one who in particular who was going to get her third plastic surgery on her thighs, and we're like, it's not the thighs that's the problem, it's your third surgery. Is that you go through the world, she's looking at fat thighs, fat thighs, fat thighs, fat thighs, fat thighs. Everything she sees, fat thighs, fat. She's at the beach, fat thighs, fat thighs. And I would never want her. Meanwhile, the woman is not thinking about her thighs at all. She's having fun with her family. When we are unhappy, we tend to project what we dislike the most into the world. Clinton voters are looking to the world to say, Trump hate Trump, hate Trump. What did he do? What did he do? What did he do? And it taints everything that could be there. I always say, and this is the way I go into every conversation, is sit down with complete lack of judgment. You'd have to have killed someone for me to be like, all right, now I judge you and you're going to have a hard time getting out of it.
That's a different ballgame there.
That's a different ballgame. But what is it about your life I don't know? And when I went to rural Alaska, the simplest thing blew my mind. They have this road in Ketchikan, Alaska that's right by the water. The problem is when it snows, there's a slope. They cannot plow the snow into the water because it technically is putting a pollutant into the water. So this poor town is stranded and unable to plow uphill because of an EPA regulation that comes from Washington. Now, how would I ever really understand the depth to which an EPA mandate from Washington can cripple a small town unless I'm there and I'm like, what do I not know? And they're like, well, the roads aren't usable. And I'm like, but you're a snow town. How do you not know how to use them? And they're like, we can't plow uphill. Simple conversations about people's experiences. That was not an engaging debate about the EPA or Mitt Romney or whoever. That was an engaging debate about how does it affect your life? I cannot get to work because I can't get through the snow because I can't plow uphill. That blew my mind. Having conversations that are about, I'm not going to talk to you about the number of Somalis detained because I could give you a source. You could have a source. There could be a third source. Who knows where? But I can tell you when I went to Saudi Arabia and spoke to someone who worked in the Somali death camps, in the Somali refugee camps, well, they're almost death camps. If I even told you one detail of what they told me, it would break your heart. But that's from what I know because I saw the person, I sat down with them, which is why I tend to have more of these conversations rather than relying on third-party sources. Is if I try to understand the Trump voter from my media source, I'm going to hate you all. I'm going to hate you all and think you're all idiots. I know that's not true. So how do I find out in another way? Is go up, and I'm the person who actually asks people, who did you vote for? And they get all panicked. I'm like, no, honestly, either way, I'm going to ask questions. And then whether it's somebody, one of my neighbors who works in the military voted for Trump, we had a long conversation about military. People are fascinating. And everyone needs to realize your life is the collection of your experiences. Someone else's life is a collection of their experiences and priorities and difficulties and struggles and family needs. You won't know them until you ask.
It's incredible. People worship government. They think that one person and one political party can make the change, and that's the thing where I'm not being a cheerleader for anybody. I refuse to be. The only cheerleader I'm going to be for is God, and for my opinion, and that's fine. If no one wants, I'm going to do my best to spread the gospel, whether you believe it or not. That's my prerogative. But I'm not going to judge someone based off things, skin color, what they believe, what they do not believe. I have so many friends that were pushing for Bernie Sanders. Okay, great. I have so many friends that hate politics. Great. Let's talk sports, Yeah. And that's kind of where I want to go next with the take the knee or take a niece. How do you feel about that? And what do you think people all over the country should know about where we go next with that.
I have been talking to so many people on both sides. Here's what I've learned, just a lesson that I think is helpful. I believe liberals believe there is great power in words, a speech, a label, a tweet. They believe there's great power in words. They get very angry about words. And again, I'm more liberal, so I would say I believe that's true for me. Conservatives believe there's great power in symbols, in gestures, the flag. It's not, one is not better than the other. But I've understood this now in hundreds of conversations, that liberals are to words as conservatives are to symbols. And so when it comes to take a knee, what is upsetting conservatives so much is the symbolism of it, to take a knee in front of the flag, which is, again, for conservatives, a huge, huge symbol. Liberals, less concerned by the symbol as by the speech and the labels themselves, and want to get into the bigger debate about, or have a longer conversation, or come up with a hashtag. A very interesting way that two sides think differently. To me, and one is not better than the other. I am a liberal inherently. I grew up, words have great meaning when they're hurled at me. The great meaning. A lot of prejudice comes through words. Unfortunately, it's true. So I think I'm more sensitive to words than maybe a conservative friend would be. But what I believe from the take a knee is something is very wrong. That now these many people at this much of a platform are saying, in as peacefully a way as they can, please notice what's happening. And it's not about the individual shootings. It's not about whether he had his hands up or not. It's not about the dash cam. Something bigger is happening. And so this documentary 13th, to me, is what I say to people, watch that. Watch it. I have no agenda there. You might not like all of it. But you'll see how in politics and in government, the blacks have been dealt a very, very rough hand as recently as 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, in very, very specific industrialized ways. To me, that is what Take a Knee is about. It's not about just the shootings. Now, should they have the right to protest there? It's a place of work. That's a discussion for laws. But I do not believe what they've done is too horrible. Now, my neighbor is a Marine, and I asked him, and he said, I'll be honest with you, I've seen people die, literally get blown up to put that flag right side up. And it sucks to see it, but it's people's right to do it. And so with that, I was sort of deeply moved that maybe I don't get the importance of the symbolism at times, of what that flag means. Liberals tend to be like, the flag's whatever. Conservatives, very important. Patriotism is very important. Liberals get scared of patriotism. So to me, it becomes yet another translation issue. But I do believe, from my perspective, I am brown. I am neither white nor black. I have an objective opinion on this. What I have seen and read and researched, and this documentary was fantastic, really showed me stuff that I should know and has made me understand it differently.
I cannot wait to watch it. You saw me pulled my pen and paper up. The 13th, I cannot wait to, because I think it will bring a new perspective, and I always want to learn. I absolutely want to learn. And
when you see it, maybe we chat again, because, it's definitely a documentary that's a point of view. You may not agree with all of it, but a lot of it's pretty compelling. And it really is like when it starts connecting things, it's sort of, it goes through the 60s, it goes through the 70s, it goes through the 80s, through the Clinton campaign, through Trump. It's fascinating. And I would highly recommend it. So to me, I believe in peaceful protest. I believe in First Amendment rights. I can see that the revenue is dropping off. At only that point, business owners can decide for themselves. But I do not believe that Colin Kaepernick, in his heart, meant it to be a huge FU to the entire world and blow up NFL. I think he thought, what can I do with the voice I have? Yeah, absolutely. The only thing with Colin Kaepernick that bothers me is he's wearing a Fidel Castro shirt. That's kind of disheartening. But I, like you, Riaz, I support his First Amendment right. Yeah. To protest. You are entitled to do anything as long as it's not harming someone else. He's not harming. If you don't want to watch it, don't watch it. Personally, I'm a Navy veteran who served overseas on deployments and things like that. I personally have decided not to watch the NFL for my own personal reasons for being a vet. And that's totally fine.
You're not going to hate me. I'm not going to hate you because we have different opinions. We need more of this kind of discussion because more positiveness, seeing where from each person's coming from, I think is huge. I think it's the way forward. Don't you agree?
I mean, I think, again, what happens after you call each other labels? Let's say I go, you're racist, and you're like, no, I'm not. Yes, you are. Then we hang up and move about our lives. If you were racist, again, which I do not believe you are, isn't it my obligation to sort of explain to you, hey, this thing you misunderstood, so that you don't do it again? Or do I just walk away in complete disgust? And that's it. There's a disgust with each other's side. And again, because I'm in the liberal echo chamber, I hear it so loudly against Trump voters. And I say all the time, Trump is not his voter. When you come to the election, you have one of two options. I didn't think either of them were fantastic, to be quite honest with you, but that's what you do. And there's such a moral judgment. And I've sat with liberal friends time in and time out and said, I can give you 6, 8, 10 personal stories of people who voted for Trump that'll explain to you, but people who are not racist, who are not, and one by one I get them, and they get a little bit frustrated, my liberal friends, with me, because I'm like, I'm not, and then they get mad at me that I'm defending Trump, and I'm, look, I have my own issues about Trump, but that's not what we're talking about. Of almost half of the people living in this country. And if you say, well, we don't want that kind of a country, then you have a real problem when 50% of the country wants a different kind of country than 50% of the country. And that seems to be what's happening, is no one's realizing that compromise is not a horrific thing. It's how governments work. But now it seems like it's all or nothing all the time. And both sides, the fuel is flamed by CNN, Fox, and then Twitter's just this huge gasoline keg to put over everything. And it's burning hot, and it's burning hot, and it's burning unproductively. And I worry that it's having a trickle-down effect. And I'm working with a professor at a research institution in New York about what is the effect on younger children. I'm trying to show that children as young as 4 and 5 now have prejudice based about other kids based on who their parents voted for. And that would the fact that the presidential election has now found its way into kindergarten rooms and how kids are seeing each other, if that is not a big, here's a mirror, we need to really examine ourselves, then I got nothing else I got no other ammo. But that's about what I'm going for, is to show you can't be this rageful, you can't be this dismissive, this disgusted at each other, and it not have an effect on kids watching this.
Absolutely. Like, whenever I have 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl. From my oldest will be 10 and I don't know how many days, an 8 and a 3-year-old. We don't go sitting at the dinner table or going out, and we don't talk prejudice. I don't talk about. I wish I would be more like my parents, because my mom to this day would never tell me who she voted for. I don't think she thought it was any of my business, and I actually 100% thinking of it in this moment go, wow, that's pretty respectful, because what does it matter? My mom never talked growing up. Okay, well, you can't like these people because they're this color. You can't do this. You can't vote this way. You can't. And I've, during the 2016 election was pretty. It was a year of hell, to be honest with you. We were all getting hit in the head, and my wife and I were having these discussions, and I'm actually thinking at this current moment is my kids don't need to hear this stuff. They need to be kids. They need to worry about Roblox, because that's the big hot thing now. Worry about trying to come up with cures for cancer or to better yourself. Like, my son is big into Star Wars and wants to be a TV producer. He already knows he's going down to Lucasfilm. I'm like, that is great. That's what you need to think about. Don't worry about Trump. Don't worry about Bernie. Don't worry about Hillary. Don't worry about any of that. Worry about being a kid. Worry about the next Star Wars movie coming out.
I cannot believe we're this many years in and we're still talking about Trump, Hillary, and Bernie. I feel like we're in 2013. Like, here we are. It's like the time never moved forward. And it doesn't move forward because the ratings are through the roof right now. For Fox, for CNN, ratings are high, and so they'll keep feeding the fires.
It is, and it's really, really sad. What should we be telling our kids? What do you think? I mean, because you're doing this research, what are your initial data coming out, or what do you think?
I mean, to me, it's that it's sort of what you said, what you said you've experienced prejudice. Prejudice is prejudice, whether it's against a person of black skin or white skin, or because someone wants to read the Quran, or someone wants to read the Bible, or someone voted for Trump, or someone voted for Hillary. it's still prejudice. When you take someone and assume the worst of them because of one factor of their identity, it is prejudice. And there was a very seminal study done years and years ago called the black-white doll test. Heartbreaking, where they took all these children, black and white, showed them a black doll and a white doll and said, what's the clean doll? And all of them pointed to the white doll. What's the pretty doll? White doll. What's the nice doll? White doll. What doll do you want to play with? White doll. What doll do you look like to the black kids? The black doll. And it's these kids. And it was showing that at a very young age, they're receiving from advertising this, that white is beautiful, great. And this is 1960, I think. Beautiful is great, aspirational, happy, leave it to Beaver, beautiful. And black is what ends up in ghettos and, is left behind. And what I'm trying to say is it was so hard to refute that, because you saw a little child say, a black child say, that doll is beautiful, but I look like that one. And it was heartbreaking. What I'm trying to do is the same thing, is how do I boil something down so simply to say, I want to play with this doll. Well, that doll's family voted for Trump. I don't want to play with it anymore. Like, what are we doing here? Like, we're talking about, that's what I'm going, is what are the commonalities that I can show people trickling down? It's just prejudice. It's more of the same. You have to learn to hate. You've just taught them to hate differently.
Yeah, it's really sad. I just don't talk with don't talk with my kids about that kind of stuff. I don't tell them I hate this. I do hate the dog barking next door at 2 a.m. Those are things you can easily hate. But to hate another human being, I've had my kids say we hate. I go no, we don't hate. Hate is a strong word. You might dislike. You can dislike a lot of things. Like I dislike half or medium well done steak. Those are kind of things you can dislike. Hate is a strong word, and I think that's where we need to tell children. We need to tell even a lot of millennials. And I'm a millennial. I'm only 33, but I'm trying to get ahead of the curve and try to help bring people more together, because it is, like you said, Twitter is nothing but a cesspool almost right now. It's absolutely hurting.
It's allowing people with no friends to feel connected, people with no real power to feel powerful, who have no real voice to find a voice. But none of it's real. It's not real. It's like putting someone in hair and makeup and taking a photo of them and saying, who's the real person? There's the mom, and then there's this version of the mom, but it's not real. And so I'm trying. It's funny, working in media, I've almost done this a bit of a pivot where I'm not really doing any projects in Hollywood for a while. I'm doing projects that actually are going to help bridge this gulf, whether the gulf is, Trump Clinton voters, but conservative liberals, whether the gulf is between the Western world and the Eastern world, whether the gulf is, when I was in Saudi Arabia, between Saudi Arabia and the modern world. How do they become a place which is respectful and tolerant, but not fall in to the problems that we've had, where, it becomes this industrial complex and people just, it's a fascinating thing. That's what interests me now. But manipulative edits and being able to sort of bring in the music cues to make someone angry, not interesting to me.
Me either. It's all soundbite world now. It's really sad. So, being a gay male, do you think that the LGBT community is being used by, say, progressives or liberals? And do you think the right wing are fighting that? I mean, I'm kind of, because I don't care if Riaz, if you wanted to marry a toaster, I could care less. I kind of go along the lines of like Glenn Beck, of get government out of the marriage. I don't care what you do at your house. Who cares? My son plays on a lot of sports teams, and one of the kids has a set of lesbian moms. Okay, I don't treat the kid any different. Yeah. I don't look at him any different. I mean, his hair is growing long and shaggy. Who cares? Who cares? Yeah. I just, to me, it's like we said earlier, it's label. What's your opinion? I want to know, honestly.
So I think that the Progressive Party and the liberals in general are made up of more of the minorities, the more of the individuals, whether it's gay, whether it's ethnic, whether it's I used to think it was the party of misfits, that it was where, if we wanted rights for a specific group like gay rights, it was going to have to come from that side. It wasn't going to come from the other side because, again, statistically, more conservative areas are more rural. They have less of the noise of it. So I feel like I don't think it's being used. I think in this game of identity politics, and you were sort of getting riled up as you're like, Okay, it's gay. Here's the new one. Here's the new one. Like there's going to be here's the trans bathroom one. Okay, here's the Muslim one. But there's always a new one coming out. I think we tend to not do a great service to a lot of these minorities. I would say, though, I am married now, federally. I have 2 small children. I don't think that was possible 5 years ago. So I'm very glad that that sort of came through because I'm a really good dad, and I wanted that dream just as much as anyone else did. So I don't know. It depends on the kind of issue. But I do think that the Liberal Party tends to be a little bit more the party of the people who didn't fit in. It's funny. I'm in Hollywood or in LA in these meetings, and they're all liberals. But they all came from conservative America, Ohio and Illinois and Milwaukee but they left because something wanted a dream, something, whatever their career was something that wasn't around them. And so by the nature, they came and we found each other in these big cities and we have more common views. But I would hear people talking about going back for Thanksgiving and say, oh, I don't want to talk to that cousin. That cousin's so racist. And I'm like, wait a second. A, you grew up with this person your entire life. Did they just become racist? How did that happen? And 2 is, what do you think that cousin feels about you coming home? Like, oh, here he comes from L.A. with his new ideas, and we're all so dumb, and we're all flyover states. And I'm like, it goes both ways.
It really does.
How we feel about them. They're aware. And so to me, I think a lot more of the minority causes tend to be liberal, and a lot more of the national cause, military and all, tend to be conservative. I think that honestly becomes where the grounds where these people are grown. We liberals tend to move from small towns to cities. Conservatives tend to, and it's, again, these are broad generalizations. But so when I think it feels like there's one identity after another coming after you is because there's always more work to do to just say people should have rights. And, I don't know if it comes down to, Glenn and I had many conversations where I'm like, there's a lot to be said for the Libertarian Party to just say, just be who you are. But, it's tricky because right now the process gives so many rights from a federal government that we need to fight the federal government to get them. If the rights were not granted by the federal government, then it wouldn't be such an issue. So it's almost like we're in a bit of a loop now that because the system has so much power, we're fighting inside to have more and more access to these rights. But to me, I don't feel manipulated or used. I think sometimes I don't like how the Liberal Party monopolizes on anger. I can't see the internal working marketing of your Conservative Party, but I get 400 emails a day, and it's all DEFCON 5, and it's all that he's inept, and and I'm like, yes, these things are important, but there's also a victimization that happens by always feeling like we have to go up against the bully, So I go both ways. I find I have interesting conversations lately with my progressive friends who are white, explaining to them when I'm talking to Glenn Beck and all that I'm not racist, and I have a lot more experience with racism than you do. Because they're so sure that they know the right answer. And I'm the kind of person, I don't like to bring things to DEFCON 5 because if you don't win, things happen very badly. And I still have to live. So when I'm with my white progressive friends, I'm like, I'm going at it a different way. I'm trying to convince people. I'm trying to show people my humanity. When I went to the small town in Alaska with my kids, like, oh, the gay family's just like every other family. They don't sleep. It's just the same. That to me is much more convincing than sitting down with each of these people in Ketchikan, Alaska and saying, you are wrong about this, you are racist about this. 2 different approaches. Mine is towards a world that I want to live in. The others is to a world that they want to obliterate so that they can win.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I want to live in a world where we're all free, liberty-minded, where if, like I said, if you want to be married to a toaster, be married to a toaster. Just leave me alone. Let me go live in my rural area and have some dogs and cats running around and let my kids, that's all I want.
As whatever that federal government gives you to your marriage, they give me to my marriage. If it's just within the confines of our home, absolutely. But if it becomes a thing of, wait, why do they get this right and this protection and this that I don't, then you end up in unfair. And that's something that I feel very strongly because I've been on the receiving end, where I had to be in the closet, where I could, people would violently get angry if I was gay or if they thought I was gay. It was a very hard life. It was a very hard life to go to a place and say, I hope I don't get beaten up for just who I am. So I don't want anyone to have to go through that. But because I've gone through that, I will fight for rights that I believe I should have, but they're only based on rights that other people that exist. It's not like I want special rights. I just want what everyone has.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone should be treated the same. Judge a person off their character, and everybody also should be, I mean, you should have whatever rights that I have. I mean, to me, it's really reflecting with this conversation. I'm really enjoying it. And I'm thinking, why would it be any different? Why is this such a clickbait for both sides? It's absolutely, to me, is absolutely, it's wrong. I mean, if you want to be gay, okay, be gay. You know, I have my opinion, you have your opinion, but ultimately, who cares? Honestly,
yeah.
Why do you think it's such a big thing? Like the last 5 years, like you said, was huge in moving forward with rights and different things like that. Why do you think it was such a hard fight for it? I don't know from my perspective, because I mean, I don't understand. Can you tell me why?
I mean, I believe that there's always been a conservative religious foundation to America, and I think that had a very hard time with the concept of gay marriage. You know, I had a very interesting conversation with someone, a phone conversation actually. Someone met me on Twitter. She's a pastor from Florida, and we had this conversation, and she said, "I hope I offend you, but I didn't support gay rights, gay marriage." And I was like, and again, most of my friends would not agree with this, and I said, "Look, I cannot fault your belief system, but now that we've spoken, do you feel like you and I should be treated differently in a court of law?" And she said, "No." So I'm like, then I feel the pain of something that this concept of marriage that was, you know, embedded in your Bible, embedded in your religion, was adjusted in a way that I think hurt people's feelings. She said, "I'm totally fine with it," but I'm like, that honored her tradition, her history, her beliefs, and said, okay, we move forward. If I had said, "I cannot believe you didn't support it, you racist bitch," we would have had a very different conversation. And I think, to me, what people do is say, "I'm afraid to tell you what I really think because the judgment will put me in a jail, and I won't be." And I'm like, to me, I'm like, we're all figuring this stuff out. So let me explain to you why I believe this is important, and then you tell me why you don't, and then we'll have this conversation. But when it comes to gay, when it comes to Islam, I'll tell people, I'll hear your opinions, but at the end of the day, I know this because it's who I am. This is information that I know very, very well. And so I tend to defer to people who speak from their own experience. I tend not to defer to people who just talk to talk. And so I think I don't have a problem with people who didn't support gay marriage. You know, no one supported gay marriage 10, 15 years ago. Everyone was all up in arms that Republicans were against it. And I'm like, do you guys forget that 10 years ago, none of this was possible? Things change. People change. Countries change. You know, you have to be able, rather than holding on to the bitterness of what they didn't do, you have to move forward. And sometimes you'll win and sometimes you won't. But we have to move forward without the bitterness and the vilification.
Absolutely. And this is something that I'm glad we are talking about this, is since I'm in Oregon, you know, the Klein's case out of the bakery.
Yes.
Don't you think that is absolutely, to me, it's like, okay, well, if they didn't want to make the cake, go to someone that will happily make the cake. And why? It was definitely, to me, I think it was politically motivated to make an example. Do you think the same way?
I'll be honest with you. You know, I have been in many situations where people have not wanted to be, like after 9/11, they asked me to leave the bar. I left. Because if someone doesn't want me there, I don't want to be there. I don't think I'm in the majority in that opinion. That if, you know, when my husband and I got married, we went to someone and they said, we feel comfortable baking a cake for gay couples, I would have been like, all right, well, I was going to be a really nice one, so, you know, it's not going to be with you. I understand why it becomes, you know, a linchpin case. It becomes one, you know, it's the same with trans bathrooms. I'll be honest with you. I don't know if that is the best use of public funds. You know, at this point when there's reading is so low and books are so scarce, is putting together and systemizing and explaining and training everyone about the use of a trans bathroom, is that the best use we have for school money right now when there are 5 million other priorities like basic education? So I think there are times where they want to hit harder and hit all the time. because it's a party of fighters. It's a party of underdogs. That's the way they perceive. And I think sometimes it feels too much. It feels like it's protesting too much. That there's this big majority and we have to fight for our rights. Some of it is true. I had to fight for my rights as a gay man. I'm fighting for my rights, in terms of how I'm perceived as a Muslim. This president is engaging in ways that are a little surprising to me about how he's sort of feeding these flames specifically with Islam. And I think it gets, to me, that's where I feel like I have to fight and explain, whoa. That's not Islam. Here's why. These were the freaks in the mountain. This is my simple explanation, is what is the most horrible sect of Christianity you can think of in America?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Is it like the people who speak in tongues?
Westboro Baptists that are protesting
crazy
armed services funerals and saying that all gays will go to hell and different stuff like that. That to me is revolting.
Okay, agreed. So let's say that the land under that church became suddenly hugely valuable to two opposing foreign nations. And so suddenly these freaks got weaponry and money and training, which they were never supposed to have because they were the freaks. This is what the Taliban is in Islam. That if you have a graph of Islam, and I'm always amazed no one does it, there are branches and branches. There's Sufism and this and all. You go branch, and there's Wahhabism. That you could circle and say, freaks. Those freaks were supposed in the mountains and caves. It's where they dwelled. It just so happened their mountains and caves were very important to Russia and the U.S. in the Afghanistani war. So they got training and money. And so the fact we all have them, we're like, this is the Westboro Baptist Church freaks. You guys gave them money and influence because the land happened to be a battleground. So to me, none of my experience of Islam, my whole sect, which is about 12 million, is called Ismailism. Men and women are completely equal. In fact, the services are led by a man, then a woman, then a man, then a woman. The 12 million of us, the population of Jews worldwide, we're not supposed to pray 5 times a day. That sort of bowing praying that they use on every news feed, I have never done. It's not the way our mosque works. There's so many variations. Islam is why it's growing. It's such a peaceful religion because it includes everyone. The problem is the Westboro Baptist freaks got money, arms, and training because they happened to be in a useful place. They don't represent anything of us. And can you imagine it was reversed? Westboro Baptist Church goes and starts invading and creating, and you're like, wait, this isn't Christianity. No, stop. This isn't what it is. It's absolutely true. And so, there's I feel like right now, the gay thing is sort of okay for now. Like I'm married, I can have kids, so I can put that fight down. Now I've got this constant 24/7. I had someone call me the other day and say, are you really a Muslim? And they wanted to have a conversation. And the way they were asking the questions was so framed of, how can you possibly X? And I'm like, you are giving away your whole point of view in the way you're asking your questions. You do not want to understand. You do not want to you literally are wondering how someone as modernist and smart as Riaz can possibly allow himself to be a Muslim. That is what I'm getting from your questioning, sir. And it was true. So it's hard. I can see I was a very angry person. I got less angry as I never did anything bad, but I would get into these debates. I wasn't as productive as I am now. Something about meeting Glenn changed me, and I changed Glenn. In that we sat down and we're like, wait a second, all the labels don't apply to you. I really like you. And so I started to question my own basic assumptions. And I have really, time and time again, said, I used to think this. I used to say white Christians all the time. Why can't white Christians? Why can't white? It's a lot of people. It's a lot of people for me to be just throwing off in one. I don't do it anymore.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
That's where I first heard you was on Glenn Beck's program and all the times that you were on with Doc Thompson. I just really admired you because you came on and you were not the typical liberal or progressive that I've been told that not told, but I've read about or seen. You're more. I like some of your tweets come out. You want to have a conversation. You're not coming in with preconceived notions, and it's fantastic. It's
to me. I'm like I'm a producer. I've always been a producer, so I always think before I make a show, come up with a show. Who is this audience? To me, I feel like liberal and conservative. These I don't even know what they mean right now. if you look at what a conservative is, and then you look at Donald Trump, socially, politically, everything, I don't know what that's conservative. And so to me, all the cards are up. All the bets are off. And so what I'm looking for now are those people who are technically call themselves liberals, but don't really feel like it represents them, technically call themselves conservatives, but don't really feel and are tired of fighting. So it may not be the 25% on the ends, but I want that 30, 40% in the middle because I believe they're ready for a different kind of conversation. And they want to ask questions and they want them to be answered and they want to do it respectfully. And so that's interesting to me is that I believe I'm a liberal. I probably say I'm not a progressive like I used to, but I'm a liberal. But there's a lot of conservative philosophy that as I go and travel the country, and I travel a lot, I'm like, that makes sense. That is interesting. All the best solutions will be hybrid solutions. No best solution is ever A or B. It's always what is the best of A mixed with the best of B. And if you can get the money and the business out of politics, then it's a whole different ballgame. A whole different ballgame.
Absolutely. Riaz, can you tell everyone where they can find you on social media? Because we're almost about out of time.
Okay, so Twitter is at Riaz Patel, and that's RIAZPATEL. And again, I'm a producer behind the scenes, so this all is very new to me. Facebook.
I'm sorry I lost you there, Riaz.
Progressive, liberal, conservative, and Trump-loving conservative. Friends of Friends did not want to even sit in the same room, was incredibly productive, and moments where we found complete overlap, we're editing that, and I'm going to start putting out like 45 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes of those little nuggets, because I'm starting to realize a lot of it is translation issues. And so that's probably the Facebook is where I'm going to start doing more of my stuff, but it's all very new to me, because I'm used to just creating and doing this stuff behind the scenes for someone else, and now I'm the guy here.
You're the face of it now.
The face of it now.
Well, Riaz, I really appreciate you coming onto the program. I hope after I watch the 13th, I will watch the 13th this week, and I will shoot you texts and as many stuff. I'm excited. I'm excited about hopefully you and I can talk in the future again, and we can work with more. Maybe we'll come in with a set ideas, and we can really bounce things off to help move things forward.
I think that's great. I would love that. And this is the stuff that really is going to move the needle. These conversations that get shared and heard are going to move the conversations because you and I are on different ends of the political spectrum, and I have said that there's nothing here that anyone can't replicate at home. Over lunch with a coworker, just sit down and say, what do I not know? Tell me, and really listen.
Absolutely. You're listening to Common Sense Radio on the Lanterns Radio Network.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz. For great radio, get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.